On December 14th, 1952, in the coal mining town of Grafton, West Virginia, 47 men descended into shaft number 7 of the Blackwood Mining Company for the morning shift. 9 days later, when rescue teams finally reached them, every single man was alive. But something had happened in those 9 days of darkness, something the miners refused to speak about, even to their own families. By November 1953, 12 of the rescued miners were dead, all by their own hands. The surviving miners scattered across the country, changing their names, abandoning families, doing anything to escape what they'd seen 2,800 feet below the surface of the earth. The official report called it a routine cave-in with a miraculous rescue. But the classified government files, sealed for 70 years and only recently discovered in a West Virginia courthouse basement, tell a very different story. A story about what lives in the deepest places of the earth and what it demands from those who disturb it. Before we descend into the darkness of Shaft 7, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. This is the kind of story they buried for a reason, and I need you to help make sure it never gets buried again. Drop a comment and tell me what state you're from. Are you from West Virginia? Has anyone in your family worked in the mines? Let's uncover this together. Grafton sits in the Appalachian coal fields of north-central West Virginia, where the Tigard Valley River winds through steep hills covered in bare winter hardwood. In 1952, coal was still king in West Virginia. The state produced 144 million tons that year, employing over 125,000 miners who went underground 6 days a week to feed America's industrial hunger. But by 1952, the industry was changing. Automation was coming. Smaller mines were closing. Men who'd worked underground their entire lives could see the writing on the wall. Their sons probably wouldn't follow them into the darkness. This was also the height of Cold War paranoia. The Soviet Union had tested its first hydrogen bomb in August. Americans were building fallout shelters. School children practiced duck-and-cover drills. The government was obsessed with strategic resources, including coal for steel production. The Atomic Energy Commission had recently classified certain geological surveys as matters of national security. Some mines in Appalachia were being quietly evaluated for potential uranium deposits or suitability as emergency government shelters. This matters because of what happened next. The Blackwood Mining Company operated 3 shafts in the hills outside Grafton. Shaft 5, opened in 1923, was the main production site. Shaft 6, opened in 1938, provided secondary production. And then there was Shaft 7, opened in 1951. This was a new exploratory shaft, and it was different from the others. Shaft 7 went deeper than any other mine in the region, reaching 2,800 feet below the surface. The company claimed they were chasing a rich coal seam. But some miners whispered that government geologists had been surveying the area, looking for something else entirely. The company was run by Edgar Blackwood, the 62-year-old owner and third-generation mine operator. Below him was Vernon Cass, the 48-year-old mine superintendent, a former miner himself known for ruthless efficiency. And there was Dr. Harold Pritchett, the 55-year-old company doctor who treated the miners and also handled what they called psychological evaluations. On that December morning, 47 men prepared for the morning shift. They were a mix of veterans from World War II and Korea and career miners. Their ages ranged from 19 to 58. Most were of Irish, Italian, and Polish descent. Most had families in Grafton or nearby towns. The average wage was $14.50 per day. Among them was Frank Novak, the 42-year-old foreman and veteran of Normandy, a steady leader the men trusted. There was Jimmy McCready, who everyone called Red, just 24 years old, the youngest on the crew and newly married. Joseph Kowalski, 38, served as the union representative and was always suspicious of management. Samuel Hutchins, who everyone called Doc, was 51 years old, the oldest miner with 33 years of underground experience. And then there was Thomas Wade, 29, the quietest man in the crew who kept to himself. Grafton itself was a company town with a population of about 8,000. Most families were dependent on the Blackwood mines. Main Street had a company store, a diner, and 2 churches, Methodist and Catholic. Most of the miners' families worshipped at St. Michael's Catholic Church, where Father Patrick Donnelly, 52 years old, led the congregation. The social hierarchy was clear. Mine managers lived in better houses on the hillside, while miners lived in company housing near the shafts. At 6:47 that morning, the men began their descent into Shaft 7. The cage elevator dropped them in groups. 2,800 feet down meant nearly 6 minutes of descent into increasing darkness. The temperature changed as they dropped, from 45 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface to 68 degrees at the bottom. The air became humid and oppressive. Their only light sources were carbide lamps on their helmets and electric lights every 50 feet along the main tunnel. By 6:52, they reached the working face. The crew split into 3 groups. Group A, 16 men, began drilling new blast holes. Group B, 21 men, started loading coal from the previous blast. Group C, 10 men, worked on extending the rail track deeper into the new tunnel. Foreman Frank Novak noted that the air quality seemed off. Not bad enough to evacuate, but something felt wrong. The canaries, they still used them in 1952, were agitated, fluttering more than usual. But there was work to do. At 8:23, the first tremor hit. A small earthquake, not uncommon in deep mines. Some loose rock fell. The men instinctively crouched, protecting their heads. Dust filled the air. Everything settled. They returned to work. At 8:31, without warning, catastrophic failure. The main support timbers in the access tunnel shattered simultaneously. Not from geological pressure, from something else. The tunnel behind them collapsed for 200 yards. Tons of rock sealed them in. The emergency air shaft also collapsed. They were trapped 2,800 feet underground with limited air. Frank Novak immediately took control. He did a head count. All 47 men were accounted for. 3 were injured with broken bones, but nothing life-threatening. He assessed their air supply. Maybe 72 hours if they stayed calm. Food situation was grim. They had their lunch pails, enough for one day. Water was better. There was a small underground spring, enough to keep them going. Communication was impossible. The telegraph line had been severed in the collapse. Their only options were to dig through 200 yards of collapsed tunnel, which was impossible, or wait for rescue. Joseph Kowalski, examining the collapsed tunnel with his lamp, noticed something that made no sense. The support timbers hadn't broken from pressure. They were pulled down. The wood showed scoring marks, like something with claws or hooks had yanked them from their positions. But that was impossible. Nothing down here could do that. He told Frank Novak. Frank told him to keep quiet. No need to panic the men. On the surface, news spread fast. Families gathered at the mine entrance. Rescue crews from other mines arrived. Edgar Blackwood brought in the best rescue coordinators in West Virginia. The assessment was grim. The collapse was worse than initially thought. Rescue would take at least a week, possibly longer. Dr. Pritchett told the families that the men had enough air for maybe 5 days if they stayed calm. After that, well, no one wanted to say it. Wives prayed. Children asked when Daddy was coming home. The town held vigil. Underground, on the first day, the men organized themselves. They rationed food and water. They set up 2-hour sleep shifts to conserve oxygen. No unnecessary movement or talking. They stayed grouped together in the largest chamber. They kept lights minimal to save carbide fuel. The darkness was absolute when the lamps were off. No natural light had ever reached this deep. The pressure of the earth above them was tangible. 2,800 feet of rock pressing down. Some men prayed. Some wrote letters they hoped their families would receive. Some just sat in silence. On the second day, they heard it. Rescue sounds. Drilling in the distance. Faint, but real. Hope surged through the group. But then, something else. Another sound. From deeper in the mine. From the unexplored tunnel that Group C had been extending. A scraping sound. Rhythmic. Like something moving through the darkness. Doc Hutchins, the oldest miner, said he'd heard that sound before. In the old mines. They always left when they heard it. Frank Novak asked what it was. Doc said the old-timers called it the knocker. Said it was the mountain letting you know you'd gone too deep. Said if you heard it 3 times, you needed to get out. They listened. The scraping stopped. Red McCready laughed nervously and called it old wives' tales. But nobody slept well that night. On the 3rd day, the scraping came again. Closer this time. And this time, they saw something. Thomas Wade was on watch while the others slept. He saw movement in the darkness beyond their lamp light. Something large. Something that shouldn't exist. He woke Frank Novak. They both watched. Whatever it was stayed just beyond the light's reach. Patient. Watching them. When they shined lamps directly at it, there was nothing there. But when they looked away, peripheral vision caught movement. Thomas whispered that it didn't like the light. They woke everyone, gathered in a tight circle, kept every lamp burning. The thing, whatever it was, circled them in the darkness. They could hear it moving, breathing, or something like breathing. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in any language. But somehow they understood it. You've gone too deep. This place is not yours. But now you're here. And there are rules. By morning, they only knew it was morning because Frank kept track of time. The thing was gone. Or at least not visible. But it left something behind. Carved into the rock wall in letters 3 feet tall. 3 must stay. The message was cut deep into solid rock. Would have taken a jackhammer hours. But it appeared in the night while they slept. Impossible. Joseph Kowalski insisted it was a trick. Management trying to scare them. Break the union. But even he didn't believe that. How could anyone carve stone silently? Frank Novak examined the letters. The rock around them was smooth, not chipped, but somehow melted into shape. The stone was still warm. On the 5th day, more messages appeared. Blood seals the bargain. The mountain must be fed. Choose, or all will stay. The men were fracturing psychologically. Some prayed constantly. Some paced frantically, wasting precious oxygen. Some sat catatonic. Some whispered about choosing 3 men to sacrifice. Red McCready broke down and shouted that it wanted 3 of them to die so the rest could leave. Frank insisted nobody was dying. Rescue was coming. But they could hear the drilling had stopped. Why? On the 6th day, the truth revealed itself. The thing, they never saw it clearly, but they felt it, showed them something. A vision. A memory. They weren't sure. They saw that this mine shaft wasn't the first. In 1891, another shaft reached this depth. 8 miners disappeared. The mine was sealed, declared too dangerous. The company buried the records. But the miners didn't leave. They were taken, fed to something that lives in the oldest rock. Something that was here before humans. Something that demands tribute when its domain is violated. The entity communicated its terms. 3 men must stay willingly. Their bodies will feed the deep. In exchange, 44 will be allowed to leave. If they refuse, all 47 stay forever. The choice must be made before air runs out. The 3 who stay must volunteer. No coercion, no murder. Free choice. This was the nightmare. How do you choose 3 men to die? Can you volunteer knowing you're sacrificing yourself? Can you live knowing 44 men survived because 3 died? What kind of men volunteer for death? The miners argued, fought, prayed, wept. Some men volunteered immediately, married men with no children. Some refused to participate in what they called insanity. Some began to break mentally. On the 7th day, air was running out. Men were dying anyway, suffocating slowly. 3 men stepped forward. Thomas Wade, the quiet one. No family. He said he'd been alone his whole life. This is what he was for. Doc Hutchins, 51 years old with terminal lung disease. Black lung. He said he was dying anyway. 6 months, maybe. Let it mean something. And a 3rd man. We don't know his name. The survivors never spoke it. He walked into the darkness and was never mentioned again. The moment the 3 men walked into the deepest tunnel, toward the thing waiting there, everything changed. The drilling sounds resumed above. Fresh air suddenly flowed through new cracks in the rock. The oppressive presence lifted. 12 hours later, rescue teams broke through. On December 23, 1952, at 7:15 in the evening, families had been camping outside the mine for 9 days. Grafton had made national news. Walter Cronkite mentioned the disaster on CBS News. The West Virginia governor promised an investigation. When rescue teams broke through, there was first silence. Why weren't the men shouting? Celebrating? Then slowly, 44 miners walked out. Not ran. Walked. In complete silence. Dr. Harold Pritchett was first to examine them. Physically, they were dehydrated and malnourished, but alive. Psychologically, they were catatonic. Unresponsive. Eyes vacant. They wouldn't speak. Not even their names. Families rushed to them. Wives embraced husbands who didn't react. Children cried daddy to fathers who didn't respond. It was like hugging statues. Edgar Blackwood demanded to know where the other 3 were. Where are Wade, Hutchins, and the 3rd man? Frank Novak spoke his first words since rescue. They're still down there. They wanted to stay. Blackwood called it insane. Frank told him to go down there and ask them himself. Then Frank went silent again. Wouldn't say another word. All 44 miners were transported to Blackwood Company Hospital. Dr. Pritchett conducted examinations. They were recovering physically, but they still wouldn't speak. They didn't respond to questions. Yet they weren't catatonic. They ate, drank, followed basic instructions. It was like they'd chosen silence. One nurse, Edith Mallory, 28 years old, observed something strange. Late at night, when they thought no one was watching, the miners did talk to each other. In whispers. Quick exchanges that stopped when she approached. She reported this to Dr. Pritchett. He interviewed her, then told her the men had been through trauma. They were recovering. Don't spread rumors. But Edith knew what she heard. Father Patrick Donnelly, the Catholic priest, tried to reach the miners. He visited the hospital daily, offered confession, communion, prayer. The miners looked at him with pity. Red McCready whispered to the priest that they prayed to something in the sky, but the miners had met something in the ground. His prayers didn't work down there. Wives pleaded with their husbands. Red's wife, Mary McCready, 22 years old and newly married, begged Jimmy to just tell her he still loved her. Just one word. Red looked at her with tears streaming down his face, but said nothing. She realized he wasn't being cruel. He was protecting her. By the third day after rescue, families noticed a pattern. Miners would nod or shake their heads for yes or no questions only. They'd write single-word notes if absolutely necessary. But they wouldn't speak about what happened underground. And they wouldn't talk at all about the three who stayed behind. On December 26th, Captain James Brennan arrived. He was 39 years old, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a World War II veteran with a Purple Heart. He brought a team of 2 Army engineers, 1 geological surveyor, and 1 psychologist, Dr. Sarah Morton, 45 years old, who had worked with shell-shocked soldiers. His official mission was to assess mine safety for future government resource planning. His actual mission, revealed later, was more specific. The government had been tracking anomalies in deep mines across Appalachia. Shaft 7 was flagged for investigation months before the collapse. Captain Brennan isolated the miners one at a time for private interviews. On December 27th, he sat with Frank Novak. "Mr. Novak, I need you to tell me what happened in that mine." Frank remained silent. Brennan continued. "I know you can speak. I know you're choosing not to. I need to understand why." Frank wrote on paper. "Some things shouldn't be spoken about." Brennan asked if there was a cave-in or something else. Frank wrote, "There was something else." Brennan asked what they saw. Frank wrote, "We saw what lives under mountains. We saw what sleeps in old stone. We made a deal to leave. Part of that deal is silence." Brennan asked what kind of deal. Frank stopped writing. Tears streamed down his face. He shook his head. Similar interviews followed. Joseph Kowalski wrote, "You don't want to know. Trust me." Red McCready wrote, "Tell my wife I love her. Tell her to forget me and remarry. Tell her I'm already dead." Others refused to write anything at all. On December 28th, Dr. Sarah Morton conducted a group therapy session with 15 miners. She used a technique from treating World War II trauma. "Draw what you saw." The men hesitated, then began drawing. All 15 drew the same thing. Darkness. Something large with too many limbs. Eyes that weren't eyes. A mouth in the mountain. 3 figures walking toward it. Dr. Morton said that shared trauma can create shared delusions. But this level of detail consistency was unusual. Red McCready spoke his first full sentence since rescue. "It's not a delusion, doctor. We all saw it because it was there. And it's still there, waiting for the next crew that goes too deep." Then he went silent again. Wouldn't speak for months. On December 29th, against Edgar Blackwood's objections, Captain Brennan ordered his team to descend into Shaft 7. They brought Army engineers, mining safety experts, military equipment, and high-powered floodlights. The survey team of 6 men descended to 2,800 feet. They found the collapsed tunnel, partially cleared by rescue teams. They found the chamber where 44 men survived for 9 days. They found the deeper tunnel that was being extended. And they found the messages carved in stone. 3 must stay. Blood seals the bargain. Captain Brennan ordered photographs. Samples of the stone. Chemical analysis of the carved areas. Then they went deeper, into the unexplored tunnel, following the path the 3 men took. 1,000 feet deeper into virgin rock, they found a natural cavern. Cathedral-sized. Not excavated. Natural. In the center, 3 bodies. Thomas Wade. Doc Hutchins. The 3rd man whose name was never recorded. They weren't decomposed. Not even after 15 days. They were petrified. Turned to stone. Perfectly preserved in poses of peace. Or acceptance. One of the engineers vomited. Captain Brennan ordered to photograph everything, touch nothing, and leave immediately. As they retreated, they heard it. The scraping sound. From deeper in the cavern, where their lights didn't reach. Something moving. The team ran. They ascended to the surface in record time. When they emerged, one engineer was catatonic. The other was screaming about eyes in the rock. Captain Brennan sealed Shaft 7 personally that night. Welded the entrance shut. Posted military guards. He typed his report immediately. The official report released in January 1953 stated, Blackwood Mining Company Shaft 7 disaster, December 14th through 23rd, 1952. Routine geological cave-in trapped 47 miners. Heroic rescue efforts saved 44 men. 3 miners, Thomas Wade, Samuel Hutchins, and name redacted, perished during initial collapse. Bodies remained buried due to unstable conditions. Shaft 7 permanently closed for safety reasons. Company fined $500 for safety violations. Case closed. But Captain Brennan's actual report went into classified military archives. Marked top secret, national security. Filed under Appalachian geological anomalies. Cross-referenced with other mine incidents in West Virginia, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. A pattern was identified. 14 similar cases since 1890. All involved deep mining operations. All involved disappearances or deaths. All silenced with government involvement. The recommendation stated, future mining operations in Appalachian region should not exceed 2,000 feet depth without military consultation. Between January and March of 1953, Edgar Blackwood personally visited each surviving miner with an offer. $5,000 cash, equivalent to about $50,000 today. Job placement in other industries far from Grafton. Company paid relocation anywhere in the United States. All expenses covered for family. Medical care for life through company plan. The condition was simple. Leave Grafton. Start over. Never speak publicly about Shaft 7. Most accepted. Within 3 months, 38 of the 44 survivors had left West Virginia. 9 men went to California. 7 went to Michigan for auto industry jobs. 6 went to Texas oil fields. 5 went to Florida. Various other states took in 11 men. Only 6 stayed in Grafton. And those 6 didn't last long. In March 1953, Jimmy Red McCready, 24 years old, seemed to be recovering. His wife Mary was 4 months pregnant. Red had returned to work at a surface job at the mine. He spoke occasionally. He smiled at his wife. On March 15th, Mary woke to find Red gone. She searched the house. Found him in the basement. He'd hanged himself from the ceiling beam. No note. But on the wall, written in chalk, I hear the scraping. It's coming for me. Better this way. In May 1953, Frank Novak, the foreman and leader, 42 years old, had moved to Pittsburgh. Got work at a steel mill. Seemed stable. On May 22nd, he walked into the furnace room at the steel mill. Climbed over the safety railing. Jumped into the blast furnace. 3 co-workers tried to stop him. He fought them off with surprising strength. His last words heard were, I promised I'd come back. The 3 are waiting for me. Between June and November 1953, 10 more followed. 2 men used shotguns in the woods. 3 died from carbon monoxide in garages. 1 drowned in a river with pockets full of stones. 1 slashed his wrists in a bathtub. 2 jumped from buildings. 1 took pills. A pattern emerged. All occurred between sunset and sunrise. All left minimal notes or none. Several mentioned hearing scraping sounds. Several mentioned promises to keep. Several mentioned the 3 are calling. 12 widows. 19 fatherless children. The Grafton community was traumatized. National media began investigating what they called the curse of Shaft 7. Father Patrick Donnelly, the Catholic priest, became obsessed with helping the remaining 32 survivors. He tracked them down across the country, wrote letters, made phone calls, traveled to visit them personally. What he discovered was disturbing. All 32 reported nightmares about the mine. All heard scraping sounds at night. All said they saw shadows moving in darkness. All felt watched constantly. Several admitted they thought about killing themselves every day. The only thing stopping them was they didn't want to go back down there. Father Donnelly developed a theory. The 3 men who stayed in the mine didn't just die. They became part of something. And that something had a connection to the survivors. The men who lived because 3 died. It was calling them back. One by one. He wrote to the Catholic diocese requesting an exorcism team. His request was denied. They called it psychological trauma, not demonic possession. In November 1953, Dr. Sarah Morton, the Army psychologist, conducted follow-up interviews with survivors. Her findings stated, subjects display symptoms consistent with survivors' guilt and post-traumatic stress disorder. However, the consistency of reported phenomena, auditory hallucinations of scraping, visual hallucinations of shadows, shared dream content, suggests either extraordinary psychological contagion or actual continued exposure to unknown environmental factors. Recommendation: all survivors should be monitored indefinitely. Risk of additional self-harm incidents: extreme. Her report was also classified and filed away.
By January 1954, 32 men were still alive. They lived scattered across America. Joseph Kowalski was in Detroit, Michigan. He worked at a Ford plant. Divorced, his wife couldn't handle his silence and nightmares. He lived alone, drank heavily. He told coworkers, "I died in 52. This is just my body walking around after." Peter Maloney was in San Diego, California. He became a commercial fisherman, never went below deck, slept with lights on, refused to discuss his past, married with 2 children who didn't know about Grafton. Victor Castellano was in Miami, Florida. He drove a cab, only worked day shift, had panic attacks in tunnels or underground parking, attended Catholic Mass daily, prayed for 3 men by name, Wade, Hutchins, and the one whose name we promised not to speak, and 29 others, each with their own way of coping. Some buried themselves in work, some turned to religion, some drank, some moved constantly, never staying anywhere long. All refused to talk about Shaft 7. All lived with the guilt. We lived because 3 men died. In the 1960s, 8 survivors met secretly in Charleston, West Virginia. They formed a pact. Meet once per year. Check on each other. Prevent more suicides. Keep the silence. Never tell families the truth. Survive as long as possible. Honor the 3 who stayed. This group became a support network. When one survivor started deteriorating, hearing voices, seeing things, talking about going back, others intervened. They saved several lives this way. But they couldn't save everyone. Between 1965 and 1980, 8 more committed suicide. 6 died from alcohol-related disease. 4 died from accidents, car crashes and falls that families suspected were suicides. 3 developed severe mental illness and were institutionalized. Several simply vanished. Families filed missing persons reports. They were never found. By 1980, only 11 survivors remained alive. In 2024, 3 survivors are still living. Anthony Rossi is 95 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. He's a retired construction worker, a widower with 4 children and 9 grandchildren. His family knows nothing about Grafton. He still has nightmares every single night, sleeps with lights on. He tells his grandson, "Whatever you do in life, don't go underground. Promise me." Walter Kovacs is 93 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. He's a retired teacher, never married, lives alone in a small apartment, volunteers at a veterans center, tells no one about his past, keeps a packed bag by the door, ready to run if the scraping sounds return. The 3rd survivor, age 91, name unknown, location unknown. He disappeared from records in 1987, maybe deceased, maybe living under an assumed identity. Maybe the man interviewed by a documentary filmmaker in 2019 who claimed to be the last survivor of Shaft 7, but refused to give his name or be filmed. In August 2022, graduate student Sarah Chun from West Virginia University was studying Appalachian mining history for her dissertation. While researching in Grafton County Courthouse basement, she discovered water-damaged boxes marked Blackwood Mining Company, 1952. Inside was Captain Brennan's classified report. Stamped, Declassified 2022, 70-year automatic declassification. She also found Dr. Morton's psychological study, medical records from the company hospital, Photographs from inside Shaft 7, including the petrified bodies. Sarah Chun contacted mining historians, paranormal researchers, journalists, and surviving miners' families. She wanted to tell the story.
In 2023, an independent filmmaker produced a documentary titled The Grafton Silence: What Really Happened in Shaft 7. It featured interviews with survivors' children and grandchildren, expert analysis of geological surveys, photographs of the carved messages, Captain Brennan's declassified report, theories about what was in the mine. The documentary went viral on YouTube. 15 million views, thousands of comments. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some claimed government cover-up. Some claimed supernatural entity. Some claimed ancient indigenous curse. Some claimed hoax. One comment was pinned to the top. It read, "My grandfather was in Shaft 7. He never spoke about it until the day before he died in 1998. He told me, we met something older than humanity. It let us live because we paid the price. But it's still there. And one day, someone will go too deep again. And it will demand payment again. Tell people, don't dig too deep. Some places aren't meant for human eyes." He died that night. Died screaming about scraping sounds. I believe him. Posted by user Red Son, grandson of Jimmy McCready. So what really happened in Shaft 7? There are three possible interpretations. Theory 1, supernatural entity. An ancient creature living in the deep earth. Pre-human intelligence. Demands tribute when its territory is violated. The petrified bodies are proof of its power. The carved messages are communication. The suicides are the entity claiming souls remotely. Evidence includes consistent survivor testimony, impossible carvings, and petrified bodies. Theory 2, mass psychological break. Extreme trauma of a near-death experience. Shared psychosis among trapped men. The 3 men actually died in the initial collapse, and bodies couldn't be recovered. Survivors' guilt manifested as shared delusion. The messages were scratches interpreted as words. Petrification was a natural mineral process over time. Suicides were PTSD and survivors' guilt. Evidence includes psychological studies, no physical proof of an entity, and known phenomena in extreme survival situations. Theory 3, government experiment. Cold War-era human experiments, like MKUltra. Government testing psychological weapons in an isolated environment. Miners were subjects. The entity was a hallucination induced by chemicals or sound frequencies. The 3 men were killed deliberately as part of a test. The cover-up hid illegal experimentation. The suicides were long-term effects of experimental drugs. Evidence includes government involvement, classified files, Captain Brennan's military background, and timing during the Cold War. The unanswerable questions remain. If it was psychological, how did all men describe an identical entity? How were messages carved into solid stone without tools? Why were bodies petrified after only 15 days? Why did suicides continue for decades across different states? What was the government really investigating? Who was the 3rd man? And why was his name erased from all records? Are the 3 remaining survivors telling the truth about still hearing scraping? In 2024, in Grafton, West Virginia, the Shaft 7 entrance is still welded shut. Rusted. Overgrown with 70 years of vegetation. But locals report scraping sounds from underground at night. Pets refuse to go near the sealed entrance. Phones and electronics malfunction nearby. Occasional cold spots are felt in the area. Graffiti keeps appearing on the sealed door. 3 must stay. The property is now owned by the state. No mining will ever occur there again. But the question remains. What's still down there? And what happens when the next generation forgets the warning and someone decides to dig deep again? 72 years after 47 men descended into Shaft 7, we still don't know the complete truth. The government files are declassified, but they raise more questions than they answer. The 3 survivors who remain alive still refuse to speak about what they saw. But this much is certain. 3 men stayed in the darkness so that 44 could see daylight again. Whether they died in a cave-in or whether they sacrificed themselves to something ancient and unknowable, their courage deserves to be remembered. Thomas Wade, Samuel Hutchins, and the man whose name was never recorded, we honor you. To the families who lived with the silence, we remember your pain. To the 12 who couldn't bear the weight of survival, we understand. And to those who still listen in the night for scraping sounds, you're not alone. The Grafton silence reminds us that some places on this earth are older than humanity. Some depths should not be reached. Some darkness should not be disturbed. But we're human. We dig. We explore. We push boundaries. And maybe one day, someone will go too deep again. When they do, the mountain will remember. And the mountain will demand its price. What do you think happened in Shaft 7? Was it a supernatural entity? Mass psychosis? Government experiment? Something else entirely? Drop your theories in the comments below. Are you from West Virginia? Do you have family members who worked in the mines? Have you heard similar stories? If this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who loves unsolved mysteries. And check out the playlist for more stories about the dark secrets hidden in America's industrial past. Remember, the mountain keeps its secrets until someone digs deep enough to disturb them. See you in the next video. Stay safe. And if you ever find yourself in a mine, listen for the scraping sounds.